Sit down. Good boy. Not sit. Good boy. You're a good boy. You're a good boy, Bear. You're a good boy, aren't you? It is approximately 7 jillion degrees outside right now. I've been putting my dogs out for like 10 minutes at a time, and they are so like miserably hot. They're so out of breath when they come back in. Obviously they have water and all that stuff. I've been getting some questions about Con because he's not in vlogs just a whole lot. That's because he's got a lot of energy. But he is our Great Dane. We've had him for 2 years. And Con is a really, really good dog. He really is. I enjoy him. Like, he hangs out in the house with the family, but I don't take him around the farm with me because if you've ever been around Great Danes very much, they are like, they're just giant puppies until they're about 2. And he's just now getting to the point where he's not just like 90 miles per hour all the time. And if you've ever had dogs before, really it's my responsibility to make sure he doesn't get into a position where he can hurt something or himself. And so he doesn't go around the farm while I'm making videos. We take him around on a leash sometimes, kind of work on things, but up until this point, it's been best for him to just kind of hang out in the house when we're out with the animals. So we pulled most of the cucumber plants out today and pulled all the cucumbers off that were on them. They were drying up. We still have the Armenian white melon plants. These were 2 big ones that I let get big because I wanted to make something with them. And check out this tomato harvest. This is today's. Like, what? So I'm gonna show you guys a trick that is very, very important if you're gonna grow a lot of tomatoes. But first, I gotta run outside really quick. Oh yeah, I've got this over here as well. That's a lot of tomatoes. Oh, y'all gonna come with me? All right, we'll go back in the backyard. Well, actually, never mind. The issue that I spotted and came out here to resolve is resolved. This little baby boy goat had his little head stuck over in the fence. I thought I needed to come rescue him, but he made his way out. Oh goodness, my poor Jerusalem artichokes are looking sad. I just put some water on them. It was supposed to rain today. It was forecasted to rain today. In the middle of the day, it just, the bottom falls out and it pours for, I am not exaggerating, 3 minutes. Dries up, sunny as can be, feels like a sauna outside. Obviously that's not enough rain to actually water anything. And when it's supposed to rain and it doesn't rain, it is so heartbreaking as a gardener where you think that you're not gonna water the garden and then all of a sudden you have to. Now this is really exciting to see. See this little potato plant? When I harvested my potatoes, some of the blue ones had begun to sprout again, and I just threw them back in here, and I wasn't sure that any of it was gonna grow. So seeing that gives me hope that some of the other ones may grow as well. We actually have some more seed potatoes. That's actually them right there. We gotta weed this and put those in, but we didn't get it done today. The sweet potatoes are encroaching up here, which is fine. They'll just keep rooting and producing more tubers. I'm hesitant to leave this on because I'm afraid I'll forget it, but they've been being watered for a good little while here. Oh, the sun just dipped down behind those trees, and it's like immediately, it feels so much cooler. It was 100 degrees today. Definitely hot. You know, funny story. My first garden here at this house was some raised beds that we put right outside my front door. Moved here, the first year we moved here was April, the end of April, and we had this crazy thing happen when we first moved here. There was a tornado in the area that was like very closely affected us and our friends. So we couldn't really do much, but Maya built me these 2 raised beds and we just put them right out the front door. And when we moved to this house, weird thing, there were no faucets outside. No faucets on the outside of the house at all. I don't know why. And so there was nowhere to hook a hose up to. I watered that garden all summer by carrying pitchers of water out of my kitchen sink out front. And occasionally when I am hand watering something, I'll think about that, or turning my irrigation on, I'll think about that. Think about just how much can change in 6.5 years. I'll tell you what else can change. In a week, I can go from eating no eggplant to eating some eggplant. And speaking of eggplants, I saw all those emojis y'all posted on my last video in reference to my thumbnail with the butternut squash. I didn't see it like that. Get your mind out of the gutters, you nasty. Oh goodness. So that box of tomatoes I showed you inside, that was just from the front garden today. And the high tunnel is actually not in full gear yet. It's just starting to produce, but there's a lot of fruits on here. We're gonna be pulling in boxes like that soon. Y'all hear my pigs singing the song of their people? Don't they know I'm trying to show you guys tomatoes? Not talk about pigs? Ooh, look at this one. That's a big one. That's a really big one. We'll go in a second. Did not walk out here to go to the high tunnel. I walked out here to save that baby goat who didn't need saving and to get some basil. But now that we've reviewed the back gardens, let's go get our basil so I can go show this recipe to you guys and give you the tip that I meant to give you from the start. No, saboteur. This little chicken is the actual worst. It's so tiny, but it will not stay out of the garden. The garden is so beautiful and peaceful on summer evenings that I almost forget that it feels like it's killing me during the day. Oh man. My wild gourds versus sunflowers. Guys, the gourds are taking the sunflowers down. Look at this. It's kind of sad. I feel like I should help. Alright, I got some purple opal basil as well as some lettuce leaf basil, which is like a sweeter variety. Most of my basil has really thoroughly gone to seed. Now you can still use it, but the flavor does change. You can even eat the flowers, but the flavor definitely changes on the plants once they reach this point. And what I usually do is actually usually go ahead and sow more basil right now because I still have 90 days left in my season, and so I can have basil again that's not flowered here in just a couple of months if I go ahead and sow seeds right now. Like, you can prune it back and try to keep it from going to seed, but it's really hard when it's this hot outside to keep that from happening. Nice. Look at that one. I can't believe we harvested as many as we did today, and there are actually others out here that are getting pretty close to being able to be picked. Ooh, I don't want to stick my hand in that web. The garter of the tomatoes. I'll let you guard them for one more day, Missy, but that other one has my name on it. We are in full swing. Alright, let's go inside. I'm going to show you guys one of my favorite recipes to eat fresh tomatoes in the summer. It's just like a summer staple. First, I want to show you guys this tip. I've shared this for the last few years. It's a really big game changer, and I just want to show you how to do it for those of you who are visual learners. If you're overwhelmed with the tomato harvest, much like myself at this exact moment, and you cannot process them all in that period of time, or if you have a very small harvest that's coming in a little at a time and you're wanting to save enough to be able to process them and do something with them, but you don't, like, by the time you get enough, some of them are starting to go bad. You can do this in both of those instances. And if you ever hear me referencing coring and scoring your tomatoes, this is what I'm talking about. And basically what you can do with a tomato that you want to save but you don't have time to process is cut the core out. And on some tomatoes, it's gonna be a little easier to do. Like, some varieties just have much smaller cores and you can pop them right out like this. And then you score the bottom. Of course, this is after the tomato's washed, so it's good and clean. And scoring is just cutting a little X on the bottom of your tomato. And then you can put them in a freezer bag. If you've got the freezer space and you don't want to, like, use a bunch of plastic bags, you can put them in like some sort of container. Also, I mean, if you're growing a lot of tomatoes, you might not have a freezer space to freeze the entire summer's worth, but if you freeze batches until you can have a canning day, you can always reuse these bags to freeze more tomatoes. Now, if you have a weird, like an heirloom that has like a weird little spot or like a large size core, you basically just need to cut that out however that looks. Usually you're just gonna have to make a wider cut in the top of the tomato. Like you can see right here, this is what it looks like to have that cut off. And then again, we're gonna just score the bottom with an X. And what this does after these are frozen is I will thaw these out. Now, Once they are frozen, their texture is ruined. They're not going to be the same texture as fresh tomatoes anymore. You're not gonna pull them out of the freezer and cut them and eat them on a tomato sandwich. However, if you've ever canned tomatoes or processed tomatoes, one of the steps that you're told to do to get the skins off is like blanch them and then put them in cold water. It's very messy. And then you gotta pull the skins off. The cool thing about this trick is that once they've been frozen and then they thaw, a lot of the juice runs out and the skins slip right off. And so what I do a lot of times in the summer is I will freeze bags of tomatoes. Let's say I want to cook some tomatoes for dinner. What I can do is I just grab one of these bags out of the freezer. Of course, I have a big family, so I would make a lot of sauce at once. But I'll pull a bag out of the freezer like this, thaw it out in the sink, and once it's thawed, I open it up, I'll drain a good deal of the juice off, pull all the skins out, and then I just dump this in a pan and simmer it down and make sauce out of it. Because you can just use the tomatoes right away, or you can pull the skins off, drain some of the juice out, and you can can those and process those, and you don't have to go through that messy hands-on step of blanching them to get the skins off. So this is a really, really great tip. It does not change the flavor of the tomatoes in my experience at all. I have just frozen them before without cutting the core out and scoring the bottom, and that is definitely a lot more work when they start thawing because they're mushy, and trying to cut that core out when they're all kind of mushy and falling apart is just not great. So I definitely suggest washing them well and cutting that out and scoring the bottom on the front end, because it really does make the skin slip right off. And right now I am doing a lot of canning fresh. I have a food mill, and I run the tomatoes through that, and that removes the skin and some of the seeds, and it kind of mills them down to the texture that I want, and that's working well for me right now. But this is the biggest tomato harvest we've had yet this year, and I don't feel like I'm going to be able to can all of those before I just don't have the time. It would probably take me being in the kitchen the entire day, and I am finishing up the last details of my book right now, so I just need some more time, and so a lot of those are going to be going into freezer bags. Alright, so I've just started to slice up these 2 tomatoes. I'm not exactly sure what variety this was. It may be a Paul Robeson. It definitely looks like that. It could also be a Carbon. Those are 2 of the dark, kind of dusty purple varieties that I have growing, but I'm not sure what that is because they are all mixed together. There's a yucky spot in this one. Sometimes tomatoes will get yucky spots in them, and I just use common sense on whether I still eat that tomato. I actually wasn't sure what variety this yellow one was either, because it looks kind of like Dr. Witchy's, but cutting into it, I don't believe that this is Dr. Witchy's because it's not quite meaty enough. I think this is probably either pineapple or Kellogg's breakfast. Alright, so here's my little tray and what I'm about to start with to make bruschetta. Bruschetta is amazing. I love fresh bruschetta. It's so simple, and it is like one of the classic recipes that caused me to fall in love with tomatoes. In 2009, I watched a movie called Julie and Julia, I think is what it's called. It's been a long time since I watched it. But I watched this movie and I loved it. And it was about this girl who had blogged through the process of cooking through Julia Child's cookbook. At some point in the movie, she makes bruschetta. And at the time, I had basically just Googled, like, how do you do this? And it was so simple. And I was, at that point in 2009, really falling in love with cooking from scratch. I was going to farmers markets. I had just really gotten in my mind that I wanted a farm, and I was just having this total love affair with food. And I made bruschetta with farmers market tomatoes. It was kind of my first experience with them. And I was just so wooed by it. It was just my favorite thing. And I think I ate this, I don't know, like every day for the summer of 2009. In fact, when I met Sweet Maya, one of the first things I ever made him was bruschetta because I loved it so much. And that's when I learned that he didn't like tomatoes. So I've got my little bowl of chunked up tomatoes. And now I'm gonna take some of this basil, which I've washed out of the garden, and I'm just gonna thinly slice these leaves into strips. And I like to use both colors just because it's pretty. I do actually have more of a reason. The basil does have a little bit different flavor profiles. These two basils are kind of similar. They are a little different. The tomatoes have very different flavor profiles. That dark reddish purple one is gonna be really rich and deep, and that orange one's gonna be more a little more fruity and mild. And so I like using both of those just because they complement one another. If you're not good at making things pretty, just call it rustic. You can get away with making a lot of ugly food if you call it rustic. All right, there's my basil and my tomatoes. I don't know, probably using about 15 leaves or so. I guess this really depends. I'm making enough for a few people here to make sure everybody that wants some can get some. All right, and now just a little sprinkle of good salt. Now you don't want to salt these tomatoes too soon before you need them, because that salt's gonna make them release a lot of their juices. I like to do this, and then I go ahead and toast my bread, and like no more than like 30 minutes before am I preparing these. Now, ooh, that sun is coming in the window. So I just put a little bit of olive oil in this cast iron pan on medium heat. Now you could make crusty bread, and if you did, I would say kudos to you. That's awesome. I bought it at the store because I have 60 pounds of tomatoes to can. This is just a baguette. Just any sort of good crusty bread works for this. I have a bread knife. Do you ever just make it harder on yourself because you just don't want to wash something else? This one's already dirty. Okay, so I've got olive oil heating up in this pan, and I'm just gonna kind of touch this to it and then turn it over. So I'm coating both sides with olive oil, and I'm going to brown this bread in the pan. You know how some people gain like their holiday weight through the fall because they're eating all of the sweets and the fudge and all of like the rich food in Thanksgiving and, you know, Christmas parties and all that stuff? I lose weight in the winter because I can pass on fudge and cookies and all of that all day. I'm fine. In the summer, all the carbs to go with the tomatoes. Oh my gosh. So y'all keep asking for a pantry tour, and I promise at some point I will give it to you. Maya wanted to finish some things first. So we're not gonna go in detail, but I do need some garlic. So I figured I'd give you a peek. Isn't the garlic so pretty hanging there? This is my canning for this year already up there. It's a start. Definitely still gonna have a lot to put up. We're building, he wants to finish the pantry before we really like give the full tour, but we're building another little narrow shelf on the other side that's just gonna be for mason jars, because you can't stack canned mason jars. You're not supposed to because it's bad for the seal. And so we're gonna do another special shelf so we can have plenty of space for all the canned goods. Hey nosy, you don't want to eat tomatoes, do you? Con has a nosy snoot. It's always getting into something. All right, so I am just taking a couple of little garlic cloves out of their wrappers. With the bread, you do need to make sure that it gets at least a little bit of olive oil on it so that it toasts well. Otherwise it gets just kind of burnt on the edges. This is doing pretty well. And then I take garlic cloves and I'm just gonna cut them and like just cut the edge off of them, sort of like a third off, because I'm basically just trying to give myself an open surface on this garlic clove. And then I'm gonna take this, it's hot, and just rub the open side along this bread. You know, so it's pretty well done. It's not gonna like break off onto it or anything like that. You're just rubbing that flavor onto this bread. So when I serve this, I serve it like the bowl of tomatoes and basil with the toasted bread instead of putting them all on all at once. And this is so simple and so delicious and is like the actual taste of summer for me. If you're like a total garlic lover, you can totally cut those cloves up and put them in the tomatoes as well. Some people can't do raw garlic, but I really like it. Also, you can put cracked pepper in this as well too, if you like pepper on your tomatoes. I do, but I just didn't think about it. But yeah, that is one of my most favorite ways to eat tomatoes. Now, I love canning tomatoes and I love putting them up, freezing them, whatever you're gonna do. I showed you guys the confit, the cherry tomatoes yesterday. Thank you for helping with the pronunciation of that. And I love all of that. I love finding ways to preserve it for later. But one of just the joys and the delights of growing your garden for me is getting to eat food that was growing on the plant that morning. And using simple means to just make them shine and enjoying them in all their glory. Stuff like this, that's why I say it tastes like summer to me, because it's the only time of year that I will eat something like this. Like I wouldn't make this with, you know, tomatoes that were grown out of season and shipped, because they wouldn't taste the same. And so I choose to eat seasonally. And in some cases that's food that I grew, in some cases it's food that I purchased and supported other local farmers, but I love eating seasonally because it kind of brings about this anticipation and building up for the best thing rather than settling for an okay thing all year. I like waiting. I like the way that it feels to wait and have the best thing. And so this is one of those like very gratifying dishes that it's that reward of, hey, you didn't eat that other stuff the rest of the year, you waited for this, and this is one of those times that I get to enjoy it the most. So I will leave you here because I have a delicious plate of food to finish off, and I'm not gonna do that on camera. Thank you guys for hanging out with me this evening. God bless you. Until next time.